I'm so pleased to be here because one of the things that I see when I'm working with my clients or when I'm working with my Moms Without Worry program is that parents are worried about the effect of digital devices on the lives of their kids. And so I'd like to have a show of hands. So how many of you worry that something bad could happen because of a smartphone or a tablet and your kids' interaction with it? How many? Okay, excellent. How many of you have wanted to throw away your child's phone, tablet, controller, iPad, computer? Okay, yes, I have actually threatened to do that. How many of you have given a child a smartphone so that you could keep track of them or they could check in with you? Yeah, right. And then how many of you use smartphones? And how many of you use social media? Okay, so this illustrates the conundrum that we are in as parents. We have these amazing digital devices, and our children have access to them. And in our schools, starting in kindergarten, in most schools, they're starting to learn how to use these devices. And our dilemma is, how do we raise them in a digital world and teach them to use these tools properly and to do it with a minimum of risk? And so I'm going to talk to you about that. So, how do I move this? I'm hitting the forward button. Oh, here, thank you. Okay, sorry. Here, okay, thank you. All right. The first thing that I want to bring to your attention, and it reflects part of the problem, is when you poll children today and you ask them what is the most annoying thing that your parents do, they don't say timeout, they don't say chores, they don't say the way you chew at the dinner table. They say you're on the phone too much. And they don't mean talking on the phone, they mean like this. You're going through your social media, you're texting, you're doing stuff like that. And that tells us something. And it's not quite what you might be thinking, because you might think this might be the lecture about be a good role model. Actually, it's not. What that tells us is our children are looking for the same thing we are. They're looking for joy and shared joy. They're looking for connections. They're looking for relationships. They're looking for mastery of those skills. And they need to do that with you as well as with other people. And phones oftentimes can get in the way. Tablets, computers, all of that. So let's talk about what do we know from research about what the advantages are of having digital devices. And I'm talking specifically about children. We see that it's a very effective communication tool. And kids use it to schedule things, to communicate, they video conference, they have conversations, they get help with homework, they communicate with teachers, parents, and we see that that's a good thing. We also see it's a source of entertainment. And one thing that's important for you to know is if you're 12 or under, you view a smartphone as a toy. Whereas if you're 13 or older, you tend to view it as a device to access your social world and access research or information that you need to get about other people or things. And that is going to affect how you view using a phone and whether or not you take some of the morality of it seriously. We also see that children get news on their phone. And in fact, in my family, I have a son who's very interested in foreign policy, and he always lets me know before anyone else what's happening around the world. And it's amazing. He has different research feeds that he follows that I have no idea how to access. So we see there are positive things. It's not all bad. We also see with certain types of video games that kids acquire teamwork skills, strategy, and problem solving. So it's not all bad. However, you've probably heard of some of the bad things. So one of the things we know is that the digital world is unforgiving of mistakes. If you accidentally send a picture of your penis to all your friends, it could be there for life. If you accidentally say something really mean or stupid in an impulse because you can do it and you don't have anything to slow you down or make you thoughtful, it's out there. And many of us have had kids who've made these kinds of mistakes. The other thing that we see is porn. And this is one that's of great concern to me. And how many of you, well, let me guess this. I'm going to give you different things. And you raise your hand if you think, what's the average age of the most frequent user of porn? Okay. Men in the 18 and older category. Anyone raise your hands? Okay. Boys 15 to 18. Okay. We've got some good votes there. Boys 12 to 13. Okay, we got some votes there. How about 10 and 11? That's what science shows us. Your 10 and 11-year-old boys know how to get online, and they are getting lots of porn. And our problem now is that porn isn't what it was 30 years ago. It portrays many things that have very little to do with human love and human relationships. And we see that that is affecting men. And we now have groups of men who, I forget how they name themselves, but in effect, they're unable to have an orgasm with a human partner. And it's because they've had repeated high-frequency interaction with porn material, and they've become sort of classically conditioned to that. So this is something you need to be aware of. And then also sleep deprivation. Nationally, when we look at high schoolers, we see that the average kid is almost 2 hours short of the amount of sleep that they need. And your typical teenager is going to need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. During rapid growth periods, you need more sleep. Just like when an infant is in a rapid growth period, you see them eating more and sleeping more. Same thing happens to teenagers. And one of the things that we see happens with digital devices is many kids get caught up in this pattern of having it on their person and then knowing they can reach their girlfriend or boyfriend or their friend late at night because no one's supervising, and they're having these ongoing conversations. And usually they're really exciting. It's stuff like, what are you doing? Don't know. What are you doing? In my bed. What do you want to do? I don't know. And essentially, they're wasting their time when they should be sleeping. We also, of course, see sexual predation, and we particularly see that oftentimes young teenagers and children are not aware that a person showing interest in them could be a sexual predator, and they're unfamiliar with that, and they can fall victim to it. And I've had patients where this has happened. They thought someone was really being their friend and being so nice and sending them gifts. And all they were doing was grooming. We also see addiction. And this is something the National Institute of Health is studying. And at this time, we know that people can get addicted to video games. And what you need to know is that all these big video game companies hire industrial organizational psychologists who have figured out the perfect reward ratio to make you play one more play, or to buy one more skin for your character, a different accessory, or a different weapon. And every time you have something happen, you get a shot of dopamine. And as we all know, dopamine is what happens when you take opioids or other types of drugs. And kids can get addicted. We aren't exactly sure which kids are most at risk. We do have some known risk factors. Kids who are very socially anxious and feel like they're not comfortable socializing. This feels like a safe way to socialize. We see kids that are depressed doing this as well, and kids with ADHD. But apart from that, we don't have a good way to tell which kid is going to be the one that's likely to have this happen. That means that we have to watch the pattern of play and when our kids are playing. And I have had patients who have gotten into this addicted mode where they have become very clever. They've figured out, even when their family turns down the modem and the Wi-Fi in the house, how to hijack the neighbors or to somehow form links with a friend's phone and another phone so they have a way to get online. And we have reports of children who have died from dehydration, not children, but young men who have died of dehydration and lack of food because they have been on playing and playing and playing. So this is a serious problem. We're still trying to figure out what the right treatment is for this, but we're working on it. And then also, what we see is that although this can be an excellent communication device, it doesn't teach a lot in terms of reading nonverbal gesture and that live interaction. And if you think about the fact that 70% of our communication is nonverbal, it's our tone, our gesture, our animation, then that's a problem. And so we see now that amongst the millennial generation and younger, that many kids who spend a lot of time online are not as good at reading other people and detecting humor, discerning what the expression is from looking at someone's eyes, because they just haven't had enough practice. And so that's a concern. And then phubbing, phone snubbing. And this is what happens when you're with someone and they're like this, and you're talking to them. It's a snub. And what you may know is that social bids are incredibly important in relationships. If you want a healthy marriage, a healthy friendship, healthy relationships, then you have a very high ratio of responding to someone's social bids. And a response is just that you acknowledge they made a bid for your attention. So this is one reason when you're at dinner and your spouse is looking at their phone, you feel pissed off. And it's why when your kids bring the phones to the table, you feel annoyed. It's because you are not having your social bids for attention responded to. And the other thing with phubbing is you see kids don't learn to respond to social bidding as well when they're on the phone. And what I find fascinating is kids will be sitting next to each other, texting each other. And I get why you would do this in class. But I'm talking about when you're at the park or you're at Panera. I see this happening. And this is telling me someone is not as comfortable with live interaction. Because the truth is, face-to-face interaction is much richer. And when you've been trained to do that, you realize that and you welcome it and you want more of that. So when I'm talking about kids are learning, want to build joy and seek shared joy, oftentimes they're looking to their digital device, assuming it's going to give them all of that, when it only gives you a certain portion. And then we are doing research looking at video interactions, and we see that is better than just texting or just emailing in terms of learning social skills, but it still is not as good as that face-to-face live interaction. And then lastly, FOMO, fear of missing out. And we see that kids are shy, who are socially anxious and not feeling very confident. This is really difficult because, of course, online we see a more positive portrayal of things. We see other people doing these cool pictures. You know, here I am with this really neat group, and we're getting pizza, or we're having ice cream, and it's wonderful, and it doesn't show how you were all fighting 5 minutes before. And we see that the more you read other people's walls, the more you look at their Instagram pictures or Snapchats, and this is true for adults, the more you read their Facebook events, the more depressed and inadequate you feel. And that's because we make social comparisons, and then we know the reality of our own lives, which is it's not always cheery. And then when we see someone else where, like, I have a couple of friends who are always putting stuff about all the cool awards their kids get and the amazing things. And I have to admit, I don't go and watch that because I have 2 sons who have never won any awards. And they're not likely to. And you know, and one of them, I know his team is going to be very happy when and if he graduates from high school. So, but I do that to protect myself. But kids don't know this, and we have to teach them about that because they aren't wise yet, and they don't know what's true and what isn't. And even though they may be using Photo Booth and Photoshop to try and spice up their pictures, they don't think, so is everybody else. And it's pretty fake. And so that's a problem. So how do we frame this in a way that we can manage it and can be successful as